Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to day 6, hopefully. Fingers crossed I post these in the order that I actually plan to, but regardless, welcome back to a day in palette week where I'm posting a video every single day for 7 days all about eyeshadow palettes, all themed around palettes in some way or another. Earlier this week, I posted a video about my Q2 palette usage. So my usage from the months of April through the months of June. And today I have 40 eyeshadow palettes throughout my collection to share with you that I have not used this year yet. Some of these are new to my collection this year that I still have not gotten around to using and testing. And then I also have quite a few that I have already owned or previously owned before 2021 that I still haven't used this year. So been a full 6 months without using these palettes. So if you guys are interested in seeing all of the unused eyeshadow palettes throughout my collection, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project planning content, palette themed content, or you just like to chit chat about makeup, I would love if you would consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's just get into the video. Okay, I'm hoping that I'm counting correctly, but I have 8 palettes that I have purchased in 2021 or that have come into my collection in 2021 that are still unused. So I'll share those first, but that means that I have 32 palettes in my makeup collection that I have owned for all 6 months that I am talking about, and these may be unused even farther than that. Actually, shoot, I think I have 9 palettes. 9 palettes that I purchased this year and 31 that I owned for all 6 months that have gone untouched. So let's start with the palettes that are newer to my collection that I brought in this year. Up first, I have this one from Oma Beauty. It is the Coming to America Neon palette, and this is what this palette looks like. It is really beautiful, and I was excited to pick this up, one, because I just wanted to try more from Oma Beauty, but second, because I really enjoy my Sugar Pill Bite Size palette, which is just a cute little mini colorful palette, and this kind of gave me like the same just mini colorful palette vibes. I think the reason I have yet to reach for this is I have been just a neutral loving gal this year. Last year I definitely had fun playing around with color, but I've been all about the neutrals this year, which I feel like neutrals are like back. Not that neutrals were never not on trend, but I feel like I'm definitely seeing more neutrals in terms of makeup this year. I don't know if that's just me, but I am still planning to get around to testing this. Still have not used this yet. Okay, up next we have my Natasha Denona Love palette. I have since used this palette one time, but I wanted to go off my calculations when I did like my mid-year check-in. So in terms of by July 1st, these had not yet been used. So this is the Natasha Denona Love palette. If I did not say, my husband purchased this for me for Valentine's Day. This was on my wish list all last year, and I was so excited to get this, and then it just sat untouched in my collection. I will say I have been really into pinks this year. I'm not as interested in the purples, but I loved the purple tone look that I did the other day. I wasn't sure I liked it, but then when I was editing the videos that I filmed that day, I was like, you know what, this is super dramatic and intense, but I really enjoy this. So I am excited to continue to play around with this eyeshadow palette. I have this one from Juvia's Place. I placed this order at the end of 2020, but I don't think it got to me until 2021. This is the Mauves palette. I also picked up the Pinks palette, which I have used a few times, but I have not yet gotten around to testing the Mauves. This shade looks so beautiful. I don't know why I have not tried this yet. I think I was getting a little bit purpled out as well, which is why I have not reached for this one, but I still intend to. And then speaking of purples, I have a couple more purple palettes. So I have this one from Aether Beauty, which I feel like I've reached for this. It looks like I have, but maybe I just did not mark this. I feel like I've reached for this one time at least. I love my little Aether mini quad, so I am really excited to play around with this. This is one that I think I was so excited to get. Sometimes I do this when I'm really excited to buy something, then I put off using it for whatever reason. I don't know if I just feel like it's too pretty that I can't use it, but I am really excited to play around with this, and I need to get around to doing so. And then the last purpley palette to share is this one from Melt. This is the She's in Parties palette, and I think part of the thing that's holding me back is purples in general. Sometimes I struggle to work with, and then Melt's formula sometimes just takes a little bit more finessing, takes a little bit longer for me to work with, to blend and to create a look, which is why I think I have not yet reached in to this palette, but again, I was so excited to buy this one. This has been on my wish list for a while. I like wanted this when it released, but then I held off. I need to get around to testing this out. And then speaking of melts, I was also just so excited to purchase this. And I think part of the reason I was so excited to purchase this is because so many people rave about this palette. This is the Vita palette, and I have reached into this one time, I will say, but it was just for like one shade. It's super beautiful. I knew when I purchased this that this wasn't a palette that would get a ton of use in my collection, but I just really wanted it. One, because I just like collecting melts palettes. Honestly, even just for like the artwork and the aesthetic of the palette, I just think in terms of packaging, they really, really knock it out of the park. But yeah, I haven't gotten around to testing this. I should, because this is like the time of year that I feel like it would make sense for me to play around with these colors, but that's another one that has gone untouched. Also, the Lunar Beauty Moonspell palette, again, knocks it out of the park with packaging. And honestly, there are neutral tones in here that I could play around with. Again, I haven't been opting for color as much, and there is quite a bit of color in here. I was really excited about the purples and even like the greens and blues. But like I said, there are neutrals even for me to play around with in this palette that look beautiful. So I really need to get around to playing with this. Okay, this is kind of a palette regret. I purchased this at the very beginning of 2021 when I kept saying I want to like do all this stuff with palettes, and I wanted to rank palettes every single month, and I felt like I had to have like 10 palettes to rank every month. So I purchased this and I really did not need to. It is the BH Cosmetics Lunar New Year 2021 edit. And I was excited because I loved the like bright pops of neon in here, but there are quite a few pressed glitters in here as well. There are some neutrals, so I feel like I could definitely get some neutral looks out of here. But I think when I look at this, I just think of the regret, which is why I haven't reached into it. Definitely should not have purchased this one, but it is in my collection now, so I may as well just like at least test it out. And then the last new one to my collection this year that I have yet to test out, which again, I was so excited to purchase this palette. This is the Be Perfect Carnival 3. A very beautiful, colorful palette. I think because this palette is so large and so colorful, that's what's holding me back most. There are neutrals in here though, and there's some really, really pretty shimmer, like foiled shades in here that I was so excited about. So, ooh, that looks pretty cute. Yeah, I need to get around to testing this out. All right, so those were the palettes that are new to my collection this year that I have not yet used. Now let's get into the 31 other eyeshadow palettes that I had already owned. I'm gonna start with my ColourPop palettes that I have not yet reached for this year. I think I have 3 of them. I have the Lil Ray of Sunshine. I think part of the reason I haven't reached for this is because it reminds me more of fall, and I picked this up last fall, so going into 2021, I had been reaching for it some, but really want to get back to that. Then the ColourPop That's Taupe palette. I feel like I thought I had reached for this, which is why I'm glad that I track, because sometimes I'll look at my collection and I'm like, oh yeah, like I've recently used that, and then I'll look back and be like, no, I actually haven't reached for that in 6 months. So a beautiful cool tone palette, need to reach for that. And then the She's Got Solstice palette, I did recently rank my ColourPop palettes, and this one did rank lower just because the color story doesn't speak to me as much, but I really do love this Super Shock shade. This is a palette I'm considering just depotting some of the shades and getting rid of the rest, just because this just doesn't like creatively inspire me, but I do really like a few of the shades. So I don't know that I could motivate myself to reach into this all that often, if I'm being honest. I do have 2 Huda Beauty palettes that I haven't, no, I do have 3. Oh, I have 3 Huda palettes that I have yet to reach into this year. One of them I recently rolled into my Pan Those Eyeshadows, so I will be reaching for this one soon, and that is the Huda Nude Medium palette. I do already have 1 pan in this palette, and I think it's a really nice palette. This is one of her Obsessions palettes that I felt was really good quality, so I'm a little disappointed in myself that I have not reached for this yet this year, but I will be reaching for this quite a bit now that it's back in my Pan Those Eyeshadows. I also have not yet reached into the Khaki Haze this year, but I was not impressed with the quality of this when I tried this last year, so I just really haven't been that motivated to reach for this. This is another one I'm kind of considering decluttering. I think maybe I'll put this in, I might put this in like a palette chopping block and then try and decide, because some of the like shimmers just look so pretty, but I remember being super let down by them. So I think I just need to use this one more time, and then I will probably be ready to just get rid of that. And then also from the nude line, I haven't reached for my Nude Rich palette yet either this year. This is definitely a palette that is more like fall winter for me, but I guess I didn't reach for it January, February. I do see myself reaching for this a lot more in the like fall winter months or the later months of this year. But another one I have not yet reached for, both of my Persona palettes. I love these things. Why have I not reached for these? I rave about the Persona Identity one all of the time. And I feel like this is one of those circumstances where I know I love it so much, and sometimes I struggle to like reach for the things that I love because I feel like I should only reach for them on like treat yourself occasions, which just does not logically make sense at all. So have not yet reached for either of my Persona 2 palettes. My Makeup by Mario Rosy Glam Quad. I've reached for Bronzy Glam quite a bit this year, but have not reached into my Rosy Glam Quad at all. Again, I was feeling a little bit purpled out towards, or so far this year. And speaking of like mauves and purples, this was a favorite last year. And I think I just kind of like wore myself out with this one. This is the Lawless, the baby one palette. I had used this so much the last few months of 2020, which is why I think I haven't reached for this yet in 2021, but I was raving about this palette. So also like, why have I not reached for it? And another palette I was using all the time towards the end of last year and haven't reached for this year is the Pat McGrath, what is this? The Mothership Rose Decadence. This is the 6-pan palette. I don't think you can get this one anymore. And I do have an eyeshadow pan in this palette. This was a palette that I wasn't that excited for the first few times I used it, but the more I used it, the more I loved it. And I really have been into like pinks and not purples. I was saying I was purpled out. I've been into pinks this year, so you'd think I should reach for this more. All right, you guys, from Dose of Colors, I have 2 palettes that I absolutely love. I have the Baked Browns palette, which I have 2 pretty significant pans in, and this is such a wearable palette. Why am I not reaching for that? Also my Sassy Siennas, which I love. I think I even talked about this in my favorite like springtime palettes. I swear I have reached for this. Like there's a few that I'm like, I swear I've reached for this, and maybe I just forgot to mark it. But I need to actually just pop this into my drawer after this because this is so beautiful for the summertime. Another palette that I rave about all the time, or have raved about all the time on my channel in the past, but haven't reached for this year. My Friendcation palette, Girlfriend. This is like a favorite palette of mine. Why? So eye-opening. I do have 2 ABH palettes that I haven't reached for. One is the Amrezy palette. I feel like I have not reached for this probably since like last March. I think I reached for it maybe a couple times in the fall, but I actually really do enjoy this palette, so no excuse. And then my ABH Carly palette as well. I have a couple pans in here, and I actually do really enjoy this palette. This is one that I didn't think I liked, but the more I used this one as well, the more I liked it, so gotta pull that one back out. A couple of neutral palettes. I have my Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. Like I love this palette, great quality, very wearable. Haven't reached for it. My Zoeva Cocoa Blend, I do think I'll end up decluttering. This is in my palettes on the last 2 raw, and I still cannot motivate myself to reach for this, so I do think I'll end up decluttering this one. I have these tones in my collection, and honestly the formula, like the matte formula I like, but the shimmer formula was super underwhelming in my opinion, so I do think I'll end up decluttering that. Also the Urban Decay Naked Honey. Now this is one I was using a lot last fall, but haven't reached for yet this year, and I really enjoyed this. Like I enjoyed this palette so much, so again, no excuses. My Kaleidos Futurism 6, the Lunar Lavender. Again, I've been a little bit purpled out. I was having so much fun with purple last year, but like I have a couple of like bluey purpley looks that I have in mind, and I feel like, oh, that's so pretty. I need to reach back into this because I miss using that. My Nabla Dreamy 2. Raved about this palette all the time last year. I did use this quite a bit last year, but like I absolutely adore this palette. I love Nabla. You guys know I love Nabla. I talk about them all the time, and I've been neglecting this one. Natasha Denona, I think nope, I have one large and then I have one mini. I haven't reached for my Natasha Denona mini gold. I've mentioned on my channel before, this is not my favorite mini palette. I don't really love this neutral brown. I don't like the way it pulls in terms of like undertone on my eyes, and I do really like the green. It reminds me a lot of the green that I have on my eyes today, which is from the ABH Jackie palette. But yeah, I've never felt that motivated to reach for this, so I wasn't really surprised I had not reached for this. However, I haven't reached for my Natasha Denona Biba palette at all this year. And again, neutral, wearable. It's Natasha Denona. Like, I'm doing Natasha a disservice by not using that. Another palette I was obsessed with last year and used all the time that I was so surprised I hadn't reached for it all this year is my Odin's Eye Solomane palette. So pretty. I need to pull this one back out. Part of the problem too is I've brought so many palettes into my collection that I've been trying to review. I just obviously have not had the time or the eye space to get to all of these palettes, but this is one I absolutely adore, so I need to reach back into this. I love my Odin's Eye palettes. Another Nabla palette I haven't reached for. This is a palette that I think in my head it's like a favorite of mine, but then I find myself just never reaching for this for whatever reason. This is a palette that is so fun too, and you can get such a variety of looks from this. So another palette that I am so excited to have in my collection and so disappointed in myself for not using yet this year is my Tiny Marvels palette. I'm pretty sure I talked about this in my spring palettes too and just didn't get around to using. So there's that. My Melt Gemini palette. This is a grungier palette. This is a palette that I definitely will plan to reach for more in the fall time. But yeah, not even one reach for that. I was really surprised by this one too, just because this has always been like a go-to palette for me, especially when I'm in a rush. However, I've been reaching for Natasha Denona Mini Nude just so often this year. But the Juvia's Nubian Mini palette, such an easy everyday palette. Haven't reached for that. And then the final two, I have my Marc Jacobs Electric palette. I did use this quite a bit last year to hit pan on this shade, so I don't know if I was just feeling like burnt out by this. I also have this stored in a weird place, so that could also be playing a factor, but haven't reached for that. And then my most shameful of all, my Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction. Now I did tap the green. I did tap this all over my eyes today, and I actually tapped this all over my eyes yesterday, but as of June 1st or July 1st I hadn't reached into my Bronze Seduction at all. Pulling this back out, I'm like, I need to pull this out for the rest of the summer because I think this is my favorite Pat palette that I own in my collection. I love the like brown mattes, and then I do love all of the shimmers in this palette, like even the red or like this shade right here. The gold is one of my favorite like bronzy golds in my collection, so I will promise you guys that this will get more use in the upcoming days. But that is going to wrap it up for today's video. Those are the 40 palettes throughout my eyeshadow palette collection I have not reached for yet in 2021. I would love to know, do you guys have any palettes in your collection that you have not yet reached for this year? What are they? What are you struggling with? Do you need to declutter? Some of these I'm like, I probably should declutter. I do have a fun video coming up in the next couple of days where I have all of these palettes in my Tiny Decisions app, and I'm randomly selecting 4 palettes to work on for a month, and then I'm going to come back and either declutter the palette or like I'm going to share looks with you guys, whatever it might be. I'm still like kind of deciding what I want this series to look like, but I know I'm going to randomly generate 4 palettes that I want to just use a little bit that have currently gone unused. So stay tuned for that video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting my channel and for supporting Palette Week. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.